This is eternal human spirit, where every story proves why humanity never breaks.
The hook in the endless darkness of space, the stars burned like cold fire, and around them, countless empires rose and fell. The galaxy was vast, filled with thousands of species, each proud of their strength, their power, their history, and yet, when they spoke of humanity, their voices always carried laughter. To them, humans were fragile creatures, soft and breakable, with short lives and weaker bodies. The alien councils often used humans as an example of weakness. They are curious but not dangerous. One alien leader once said, "They are clever, but too emotional." Another declared, "They are like children wandering into the affairs of giants." They mocked Earth, they mocked human soldiers, and they mocked the very idea that humanity could stand in a war among the stars. But in the shadows of that arrogance, a storm was beginning. The galaxy had grown used to the endless wars of powerful empires. For centuries, the great alien armies fought over planets, resources, and honor. Humanity was too small to matter in these wars. Humans had no great fleets, no ancient technology, no mighty weapons to shake the stars, and so the galaxy forgot them, until the day the Xeron Empire declared war. The Xeron were not like other aliens. They were brutal, proud, and merciless. Their empire stretched across hundreds of star systems. Their soldiers were tall, armored with living metal, and their voices carried the weight of death itself. They did not invade quietly. They wanted the galaxy to watch. They wanted everyone to see what happened when the weak dared to resist. Earth became their target. The Alien Council laughed when the first reports came. "A war against humans?" They sneered. "That is not a war, that is a hunt." The galaxy leaned forward to watch, convinced the humans would fall within days, but not everyone believed. Among the billions on Earth, there was one man who listened differently. He had no throne, no power, no voice in the great councils. He was only a soldier, scarred by battles both on Earth and beyond. His name was whispered only in fragments, a man who had survived things no one should survive. He stood on the walls of a burning city as alien ships thundered above. His eyes were not filled with fear, but with fire. In him, there was no acceptance of defeat. He looked at the alien fleets and saw not gods, not giants, but enemies who could bleed. The people ran, the armies broke, and the cities fell. But this one soldier remained, and in that moment, when the galaxy believed humanity was broken, a story began. He moved through the ruins like a shadow. Every step carried purpose, every breath carried defiance. He fought not with the strongest weapons, but with something the aliens could not understand. He fought with determination, with stubbornness, with a spirit that refused to die. The Xerons laughed when they first heard of him. A single man against an army, they thought. It was impossible, but the laughter did not last. For in every battle, he survived. In every ambush he turned, in every alien soldier who fell to his hand, the legend grew. Whispers spread, first among the broken humans, then across the stars. They called him the Ghost of Earth. They called him the Lone Defender. But to the aliens, he was something worse. He was proof. Proof that humanity was not helpless. Proof that a human could fight and win. Proof that their empire was not untouchable. The council chambers across the galaxy grew quieter when his name was spoken. Some said it was only a myth, a story of hope created by the weak. Others said it was real, and if it was real, then the galaxy was about to change. On the battlefield, the soldier did not think of legends. He did not think of fear or hope. He thought only of survival. And survival meant fighting until his last breath. The city burned around him, but he stood tall in the flames, a single man staring at an empire that called his people helpless, and in his silence, in his defiance, a message was carried across the stars. Humanity is not helpless. The galaxy did not yet believe, the alien armies did not yet understand. But the soldier was already walking the path that would prove them all wrong. And so, the war began. Not between fleets and empires, not between kings and rulers, but between one man and the weight of the galaxy's arrogance. And in that battle, the galaxy would learn a truth it had long forgotten, a truth carved into blood and fire, a truth whispered by the one soldier who refused to bow. That truth was simple. That truth was terrifying. Humanity was never weak. The alien empire's arrogance. The Xeron Empire was unlike any other force in the galaxy. Their fleets were endless rivers of black steel cutting across the stars. Their soldiers moved like shadows, armored in living metal that could heal wounds and bend to their commands. For centuries, they had conquered without pause, turning worlds into ashes and enslaving entire species. They thrived on fear, on the silence of those who dared not resist. And so when the order came to march upon Earth, they did not prepare for war, they prepared for spectacle. They wanted the galaxy to watch the so-called fragile humans burn, non-honiti. The High Council chambers of Xeron Prime, alien generals stood around a massive star map glowing with the image of Earth. The room was filled with arrogance, their laughter cold and sharp as they mocked the idea of resistance. To them, humanity was nothing more than a forgotten footnote in the history of stars, weak bodies with fragile bones, short lifespans, and weapons that were little more than toys compared to the cannons of the Empire. The general spoke of how quickly Earth would fall, some wagering days, others mere hours. One commander boasted that the humans would beg for mercy before the sun had risen twice on their small blue world. The Emperor himself stood tall, his body wrapped in shifting plates of armor that pulsed with dark energy. His eyes glowed with cruelty as he raised his voice, declaring that humanity's defiance would become a warning to every weak race in the galaxy. Earth would be erased, its name spoken only as an example of what happened when the helpless dared to challenge the powerful. The chamber erupted in approval. Their arrogance was blinding. They had crushed so many before. Why should humans be any different? Across the galaxy, news spread quickly. On neutral worlds and within rival empires, the announcement of Earth's invasion was greeted with scornful laughter. Traders in the markets joked about how long the humans would last. Mercenaries placed bets on how quickly their armies would collapse. The galaxy as a whole saw this as entertainment, a minor drama that would end with yet another empire added. To the Xeron's long list of conquests, humanity, in their eyes, was not a question of victory or defeat, but simply a question of how fast the end would come. And yet, in the silence behind the laughter, there was unease. Not everyone in the galaxy trusted the arrogance of the Xeron. Some had fought them and survived, carrying scars deeper than flesh. They knew the Empire's pride could become its weakness. For while the generals mocked humanity, while they called them helpless, while they prepared their victory celebrations before the war had even begun, they did not see the one soldier standing in the ruins. They did not see the fire burning in his heart. They did not see the moment when arrogance would meet resistance. On Earth, the invasion began as the aliens predicted. Fleets darkened the skies. Entire cities shook under the thunder of war engines. Alien commanders watched from orbit as human defenses crumbled. They spoke of it as if it were a sport, counting casualties like trophies. Every victory fed their pride. Every scream of humanity became proof of their superiority. But arrogance is a poison, and the Xerons drank deeply. They believed so strongly in their own power that they did not look closely at the battles they thought were already won. In the shadows of broken cities, humanity struggled to breathe. Families huddled. In ruins, soldiers fired until their weapons grew too hot to hold, and children cried beneath skies filled with fire. To the Xeron, it was all weakness. They saw no strength in the tears of the desperate. But what they did not understand was that weakness is not the same as surrender. The more they pressed, the more humanity's spirit hardened, and at the center of that spirit stood the lone soldier. While the Empire feasted on arrogance, the soldier prepared. His body carried scars that told stories of battles past. His mind was sharp, his will unbroken. He watched the invaders with eyes that saw beyond their mettle and their cruelty. He saw mistakes, he saw overconfidence, he saw gaps hidden in their pride. Where the Xerons saw helpless prey, he saw a chance. Where they saw the end of humanity, he saw the beginning of a legend. The alien commanders laughed as they toasted their victory. But far away, in the ashes of Earth, the soldier whispered no laughter, only promises. He promised that humanity would not die as prey. He promised that the arrogance of the Xeron would one day shatter, and in that promise the seeds of defiance grew, unseen, unstoppable. The galaxy watched, blind to the storm rising, believing. The story of Earth was already finished. They did not yet know that arrogance has always been the first step toward downfall. They did not yet know that one man's defiance could become the spark that would burn an empire. And as the alien fleets spread their shadow across Earth, the stage was set. A battle of pride against will, of arrogance against spirit, of empire against one man who refused to fall. The Xerons did not fear him yet. The galaxy did not believe in him yet. But history was already shifting, and soon the laughter would end. Humanity's first defeat, the invasion of Earth, began not with silence, but with fire. From the skies above, the Xeron fleets descended like storms of steel, their ships stretching across the horizon until the sunlight itself seemed stolen. Cities trembled under the shadow of engines that blotted out the stars. Entire landscapes shook as war machines were deployed from orbit. Massive walkers that thundered across the ground like mountains in motion. To the Xerons it was a display of power, a cruel theater meant to break morale before the first shot was even fired. Human armies rose to fight, tanks rolled through burning streets, jets screamed across the skies, soldiers filled the front lines with determination. But against the might of the Xeron Empire, their courage looked small. The first battles were short and brutal. In New York, whole districts collapsed under bombardments that rained down like falling meteors. In Tokyo, the skies were torn apart as alien ships swarmed and unleashed waves of plasma fire. In Cairo, soldiers fought in the shadows of ancient pyramids only, to be swept aside by unstoppable war beasts bred for slaughter. The world was burning. Humanity had fought wars before, but nothing like this. The Xerons had mastered the art of conquest across galaxies. They had technology that bent energy into weapons humans could not imagine. They commanded armies bred only for obedience and destruction. Each battle felt less like a fight and more like a massacre. The human lines broke, cities fell, and the invaders spread like wildfire. In the council chambers of rival alien empires, there was laughter. The galaxy watched through hidden feeds and intercepted transmissions. They saw the cities fall. They heard the cries, and they mocked. Helpless humans, they said. Pathetic humans, they declared. To them, Earth's struggle was nothing more than a story already written. The helpless species had finally met its rightful end. But among the ruins, among the broken walls and shattered streets, one man moved with purpose. He was not a commander, not a general, not even someone with power to order armies. He was a soldier, a survivor, carrying his rifle through the ashes. He saw the battles crumble. He saw comrades fall one by one, and still he stood. While humanity's first great defeat unfolded around him, he refused to surrender his spirit. In London, he fought from the ruins of bridges, using traps and small explosives to slow advancing Xeron squads. In Mumbai, he carried children through smoke-filled streets, only to return to the front and strike at alien patrols with nothing but grit and determination. He was not a man who sought glory. Yet everywhere he appeared, whispers began to follow. At first, the humans called him nothing more than a survivor, someone who refused to die even when everything else seemed lost. But soon the stories grew larger. They said he fought 10 soldiers alone. They said he destroyed machines with only stolen weapons. They said he stood in the fire of ships and walked away. To the broken people of Earth, these stories were light in the dark, a reminder that humanity had not yet bowed. To the Xerons, however, the whispers were an irritation. Their commanders dismissed him as rumor. A ghost cannot kill. An army, they said. Yet reports grew, patrols vanished, squads failed to return, and always there was mention of one soldier, a figure moving like smoke in the ruins. His name did not matter. His defiance did, for while Earth itself was collapsing, this one man was proving a truth the aliens had never considered, that even in defeat, humanity could resist. The first. Defeat was total. Governments crumbled. Communication fell silent. Cities were either destroyed or occupied. Humanity was scattered, broken, and hiding among the ruins. But defeat is not the same as destruction, and though the Xerons thought they had crushed Earth, they had not crushed its spirit. For spirit is not something an empire can burn. Spirit is born in those who refuse to accept the end. Spirit is carried by those who look at the impossible and step forward anyway. The soldier walked alone through the aftermath of battles lost, his body wounded, his soul heavy, but his eyes sharp. He did not see only the death and ruin. He saw the arrogance of the invaders, the mistakes in their overconfidence, the pride that blinded them to the danger of a people who had nothing left to lose. He knew the first defeat was not the end, it was the beginning. As the Empire celebrated their easy conquest, as they broadcast their victory across the stars, believing themselves untouchable, a legend was growing quietly beneath their notice. Humanity had been called helpless. Humanity had been mocked. But in the ashes of their defeat, one man was rewriting the story. The galaxy did not yet know his name. The Xerons did not yet fear his footsteps. But already, in the silence of smoldering cities, the first spark of resistance burned. And though Earth had fallen, the war was far from over. The soldiers stand. The world lay in ruins. Cities that once burned with light now smoldered in silence. Bridges collapsed into rivers of ash, monuments shattered into rubble, and human armies scattered like broken glass across the earth. To the Xerons, this was victory. They stood on the ruins and declared themselves gods, their empire unchallenged, their banners planted in the soil of conquered nations. They believed humanity had been erased, not only as a people, but as an idea. To them, the war was over. But, in the shadows of that destruction, a different story was unfolding. In the heart of those ruins, where smoke choked the air and silence hung heavy, one man still stood. His body was scarred, his armor broken, and yet his spirit refused to bend. He had no fleet at his command, no generals waiting for his orders. He had only his rifle, his will, and the fire inside him that told him he was not done. The Xerons had grown arrogant. They believed no human could challenge them. Their commanders sent patrols to clear the ruins, convinced that the survivors posed no threat. But again and again, those patrols failed to return. Entire squads were found destroyed, their weapons stolen, their armor broken. At first, the Empire dismissed it as chaos, blaming human desperation. But then whispers began to spread, not just among the broken survivors of Earth, but among the alien soldiers themselves. They spoke of a figure who moved like a shadow through the smoke, striking with deadly precision. They spoke of traps laid with uncanny intelligence, of ambushes that tore through elite soldiers. They spoke of one man who refused to fall. They called him the Ghost, and though the Empire laughed at the rumor, fear began to seep into their ranks. The soldier did not see himself as a ghost. He did not see himself as legend. To him, there was no choice but to fight. Every step he took was not for glory, but for survival. Every bullet fired was not for vengeance, but for the future. He knew he was alone, yet he carried the weight of humanity on his shoulders. He stood in streets where children once played, and now only ashes remained. He remembered faces of comrades who had fallen, and he whispered their names as he fought, when a Xeron fortress rose in the center of what had once been Paris. The soldiers saw not an impossible target, but an opportunity. The fortress was massive, a living structure of alien steel pulsing with energy, guarded by warriors stronger than any human. To attack it alone was madness. To even think of challenging it was beyond reason. But to the soldier, it was not madness. It was necessity. He moved through the ruins with careful steps, watching the patrols, learning their patterns, studying the arrogance in their movements. The Xerons had grown lazy, believing no human could touch them. Their pride blinded them, and the soldier saw it. He turned their arrogance into his weapon. For every corner they ignored, he filled with traps. For every blind spot he became the shadow waiting to strike. The night he attacked. The sky burned with fire from alien warships. Their lights turned the ruins into a sea of shadows. The soldier moved through it like a phantom. He struck swiftly, his bullets precise, his traps devastating. Patrols vanished one by one. Alarms screamed across the fortress, and the Xerons realized, far too late, that their arrogance had cost them. The battle that followed was not between armies. It was between one man and the pride of an empire. The Xerons threw everything at him, soldiers clad in living steel, machines bred for war, beasts chained in fury, and yet he fought. His body bled, his armor cracked, but his will did not bend. He was outnumbered, outmatched, but never outwilled. The galaxy had called humanity helpless, but here, in the ruins of Paris, one man stood against the might of an empire and refused to bow. Every alien that fell to him carried a message. Humanity was not weak. Humanity was not broken. Humanity was not finished. The fortress burned, its towers collapsing under the chaos he unleashed, and for the first time, the Xerons tasted something they had not known in centuries. Fear. Their commanders spoke with rage, demanding to know how one man could do this. Their soldiers whispered nervously in their camps, dreading the shadow that might strike them next. And across Earth, the survivors lifted their heads, hearing the stories, daring to believe that hope was not dead. The soldier stood alone in the smoking ruins of the fortress, his rifle heavy, his body broken, but his eyes still burning. He did not smile. He did not rest, for he knew this was only the beginning. He knew the war was far from over. The Xerons would come harder. They would bring greater fury. But he had made his stand, and in doing so he had lit a fire that no empire could extinguish. For the first time. The galaxy stopped laughing. For the first time, the Xeron Empire hesitated, and for the first time, humanity's story was not one of weakness, but of defiance. And in the ruins of Paris, a legend was born. The turning point, the destruction of the Xeron fortress in Paris was not just a small victory. It was a shockwave that spread across the empire. For centuries, the Xerons had never faced humiliation. No enemy had ever dared to challenge their supremacy and survived. And now, one human soldier had shattered their pride. The fortress they thought invincible now lay in ruins, its burning husk a reminder that arrogance could bleed. At first, the commanders tried to dismiss it. They called it an accident, a failure of discipline, a minor disruption in their glorious conquest. But even as they spoke with arrogance, their voices carried unease, for deep inside they knew this was no accident. This was a man who had turned into a storm. The Emperor of the Xerons was furious. His voice thundered in the great war chamber, demanding answers, demanding blood. His generals promised him swift retribution. They swore that this ghost of a man would be erased, not just killed, but erased so that his name and story would never be remembered. For the Xeron way was not only to conquer, but to destroy memory, to bury hope before it could grow. And so they unleashed more than armies. They brought weapons that had only been used against the strongest of alien civilizations. They brought war machines as tall as skyscrapers, beasts bred in darkness to feed on blood, and ships armed with weapons that could melt cities in minutes. They thought no human, no matter how defiant, could stand against such fury. Across the broken world, Earth trembled under this new wave of destruction. The skies turned crimson as fleets rained down fire without mercy. Forests were reduced to ash, rivers boiled away into steam, and mountains cracked under bombardments. To the survivors, it felt like the end of everything. How could one soldier, no matter how brave, face the wrath of an empire that had now turned its full attention on him? Families whispered his name in fear, worried that when he fell, all hope would vanish with him. But others whispered his name with reverence, daring to believe that if he had survived this long, perhaps he could survive even more. The soldier himself did not see himself as savior or symbol. He carried no illusions. He was tired. His body carried wounds that refused to heal, his mind heavy with memories of fallen comrades. Yet every time he saw the fire fall from the skies, every time he heard the screams of his people, he stood again. His will was not born from strength, but from duty. He did not fight because he believed he could win. He fought because to stop fighting was to surrender humanity itself. When the Xerons sent their war machines into the ruins of Berlin, it was meant to be a show of power. Towers of steel and fire rose above the shattered city, their massive cannons capable of burning blocks into glass. Alien soldiers marched at their sides, armored and fearless, and above them swarmed drones that filled the air like metal locusts. To any commander this would have been impossible to face, but the lone soldier did not retreat, he did not hide. Instead he studied the machines, their movement, their rhythm, and their arrogance. For the Xerons once again underestimated him. They thought brute force would crush him, but brute force is nothing against a mind sharpened by survival. Through the ruins he moved, laying traps, using stolen alien weapons, turning the city itself into a battlefield designed for him. The war machines thundered forward, but one by one they began to fall, collapsing under explosions set in hidden tunnels, toppling into rivers that swallowed their burning frames. The soldier struck fast and vanished faster, striking at their weak points, disappearing into smoke before retaliation could reach him. To the Xerons it felt like fighting a phantom, their machines powerful but their confidence cracking. The beasts they unleashed, massive creatures bred in laboratories, roared through the streets, their claws tearing steel, their eyes burning with alien fire. But even they fell, not to strength but to strategy. The soldier lured them into traps, brought them into collapsing buildings, used their rage against them until their bodies lay broken in the dust. The city burned, but so did the pride of the Xeron Empire. The news of Berlin spread quickly, and this time it was not just whispers among survivors. This time the galaxy heard. Merchant ships carried the rumors across systems. Smugglers spoke of it in shadows. Rival empires leaned closer. The story was always the same. One man, one human soldier, had stood against the wrath of the Xeron Empire and lived. The laughter that once followed the mention of humanity began to fade, replaced with silence, then with unease. For if one human could do this, what would happen if an entire species rose with him? The Xerons raged, their pride wounded deeper than their losses. They unleashed even greater fury. They promised their empire that humanity would be crushed, but already the shadow of doubt had crept into their hearts. Their soldiers whispered in their camps, looking nervously into the dark, wondering if the ghost was watching, wondering if they would be next. Their arrogance had turned to fear, their laughter into silence, and for humanity, something extraordinary began. For the first time since the invasion, survivors lifted their heads not in despair, but in defiance. In hidden shelters, in broken bunkers, in the ruins of cities, they spoke of the soldier, not as myth, but as proof. Proof that even the greatest empire in the galaxy could be hurt. Proof that humanity was not helpless. Proof that resistance was not only possible, but inevitable. The soldier stood in the ruins of Berlin, his rifle heavy, his body broken, but his spirit unyielding. He did not raise his fist in triumph. He did not declare himself a hero. He simply looked at the burning machines and knew the truth. This was not victory. This was a beginning, a turning point. The moment the galaxy stopped laughing. The moment the Xeron Empire realized that humanity would not vanish quietly, and as smoke rose into the night sky, the legend of one soldier became the fire that would ignite an entire world. Humanity rises. The ruins of Berlin burned for days, the flames reaching high into the sky as if they were a signal fire meant for the entire galaxy to see. The Xeron Empire had unleashed their fury, sending war machines, beasts, and endless soldiers, and yet one man had stood against them and turned their pride into ashes. To the Empire, this was shame beyond measure. To humanity, this was proof. For the first time since the invasion began, people whispered not of surrender, but of defiance, not of despair, but of resistance. In the broken shelters beneath the earth, survivors gathered to tell the story. They spoke of the soldier who fought alone in the ruins, the man who had faced what no army could and lived. At first, the tales sounded like hope made from desperation, but as more survivors came forward, the truth spread. He was real, he was alive, and he was still fighting. The children listened wide-eyed, the old wept silently, and the young clenched, their fists with fire in their hearts. Humanity, once broken, began to breathe again. The soldier never called himself a leader, never claimed to be more than a man. He did not raise banners, he did not make speeches, yet his actions carried louder words than any command. For wherever he struck, survivors followed. Wherever he fought, the broken rose with him. In the forests of South America, guerrilla fighters began to ambush alien patrols. In the deserts of Africa, scavengers turned wrecked machines into weapons. In the ruins of Asia, survivors gathered in hidden tunnels, inspired by the legend that one man could resist. Humanity was no longer hiding. Humanity was rising. The Xerons. Notice the change. At first, they dismissed the uprisings as desperate acts of rebellion. They believed that small groups of humans could never stand against their empire. But rebellion spread like fire in dry grass. No longer bound to one city or one survivor, it spread across the globe. The more the Xerons tried to crush it, the stronger it grew. Every human who saw the soldiers' defiance carried it within. Themselves, they understood that even if they fell, they were part of something greater, a spirit that could not be killed. The Empire brought reinforcements, entire fleets sent to orbit, commanders filled with rage. They tightened their grip on Earth, believing that fear would once again silence resistance. But what they did not understand was that fear had already been broken. The moment one soldier had refused to bow, fear had begun to die. Humanity's courage spread faster than their weapons. And soon, the Xerons realized they were not fighting a lone soldier anymore. They were fighting an entire world that refused to surrender. The galaxy watched in silence. Rival empires that once mocked humans now leaned closer. Traitors whispered of uprisings. Mercenaries spoke of battles where human fighters ambushed and defeated alien squads. The story of Earth became the story of defiance. Some races even began to hope. If humans could stand against the Xerons, perhaps anyone could. Humanity, once seen as fragile and weak, had become a symbol, a mirror reflecting the arrogance of the powerful and the strength of the underestimated. The soldier himself walked among the ruins, not as a hero basking in glory, but as a man carrying the weight of every fallen soul. His body bore scars that told 100 stories, but his eyes carried something unshakable. He did not fight for himself, he fought for every human who could not, for every child who deserved to see a world free of the Empire's shadow. When he stood, others stood. When he moved, others followed. He had become more than a soldier. He had become the heartbeat of resistance. The Xerons tried new tactics. They set traps, hunted the ghost they feared, and unleashed fury greater than before. But now they faced not one shadow, but thousands. For every ambush they set, humans turned, it against them. For every city they destroyed, resistance grew in another. Their machines burned, their soldiers fell, and for the first time, the Empire began to bleed in ways it could not hide. It was not victory, not yet. The Xerons still held power, still commanded fleets that could shatter mountains, but something deeper had shifted. Humanity had tasted defiance and could never return to silence. The soldiers of Earth fought with broken weapons, with stolen technology, with bare hands when nothing else remained. But what they carried most was spirit, and spirit is a weapon no empire can crush. The galaxy, once laughing, now whispered in awe. They asked a question they had never dared before. If one human can defy an empire, what will happen when all of humanity rises together? The question spread from system to system, shaking the arrogance of rulers who had once mocked Earth. The Xerons felt the weight of that question, their commanders trembling with the realization that they had turned a forgotten race into a symbol that threatened their empire's pride. And in the heart of it all, the soldier stood, not on a throne but in the ruins, not wearing a crown but carrying his rifle, his body broken but his will eternal. He looked to the stars and knew that humanity was no longer helpless, no longer mocked. Humanity had risen, and nothing in the galaxy would ever be the same again. The legacy, the fires of Earth's rebellion burned brighter than ever. Cities that had once been symbols of despair now stood as fortresses of defiance. The Xeron Empire still controlled the skies, still commanded fleets vast enough to darken suns, but they no longer faced a broken people. They faced a species reborn. Humanity, mocked as helpless and fragile, had risen from the ashes, and at the heart of it all stood the soldier, the man who refused to fall, the man who had turned defeat into defiance. The galaxy no longer laughed when they spoke of humans in council. Chambers far away, alien rulers whispered nervously. Some demanded the Xerons crush Earth completely. Others argued it was already too late. The legend had spread too far. Even if the Xerons burned Earth to dust, the idea of humanity's courage would remain